Bill, thank you so much for joining us today. Did you want to give us an introduction? So introduce yourself, who you are, what do you do, and what organization are you with today, Bill?
Yeah, happy to do it, and good afternoon, I should be saying to Duncan over in London, and good morning to all of the listeners in the United States. I'm so happy to be here. I know that there are a lot of really good people in this business doing tremendous work, so I'm grateful to both of you for taking the time to talk to me a little bit today about what's going on at the Keane University Foundation, and also, I guess, a little bit about my background and my journey throughout this wonderful field of philanthropy. I've been doing this work for about 20 years now, and it's really all that I know. I went to school in Virginia. I went to a small school called Randolph-Macon College, which was about 2,000 students at the time I was there. And when I graduated with a degree in English, and I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do with that. I had aspirations and dreams of being the next great American author, but as fate would have it, I met the late CEO of CCS Fundraising. His name was Bill Hanrahan. He actually lived in the same town as me when I graduated from Virginia. I came back to New Jersey where I grew up. I grew up in the Red Bank area. And I met Bill, and Bill kind of took me under his wing and introduced me to some other partners and senior leaders at the fundraising firm. And that's how I learned the business, conducting development audits and assessments, feasibility and planning studies, actual campaigns, whether they were major gift initiatives, annual appeals, capital and endowment projects. And I guess you could say things really kind of started moving for me or accelerating for me in 2006, I believe it was. I was asked to move over to Paris, France to conduct a campaign for an international project. And given where I was both professionally and personally at the time, that was a pretty easy decision for me. So we decided or I decided, I should say, to move over to France. And it was a terrific experience, as you might imagine. I was living in the 7th district. The client was right on the Quai d'Orsay. And I was walking to work every day, looking at the Seine. There are tougher places to be, but at the end of the day, with a lot of work and a lot of luck, and just having met a lot of great people, we finished with a very successful project. And when I came home after my time over there, I guess that kind of caught the attention of the firm's partners, and I got bigger and bigger projects. And when I was at CCS, I guess you could say the hallmark of my career, I moved out to Pittsburgh to serve as the executive director for a $125 million capital and endowment campaign. And at the time, that was a project. And what I mean by that is that we didn't even have a centralized database of constituents. So we had to construct and build a database. We had to raise a lot of money, and we had to build a team, which ended up growing to be larger than 20. And at the end of the day, thanks to, again, a lot of hard work and luck, and really just a tremendous team that we put together, we finished with about $230 million in philanthropic commitments. And the reason that I'm telling the story is because at the time, given the sector I was working in, that was a faith-based organization. That was actually the Diocese of Pittsburgh. At the time, we had raised more money than any other diocese or archdiocese in the country, which was pretty cool. Because if you think about an archdiocese of Chicago or Los Angeles or Boston, they're bigger, right? So they would usually be raising more money, but we had actually outperformed any other diocese in the country at that time. I know that there has since been campaigns that have raised even more money than what we did in Pittsburgh, but it was fun to hold on to that title as a team for a little bit. And the best thing that could have ever happened to me is I became a dad when I moved out to Pittsburgh, and my wonderful daughter Paige was born. And while I loved the life of a traveling CCS consultant, I thought maybe it was time to go in house. And I decided to get Paige back to her grandparents in New Jersey. And I decided to move over to Catholic Charities of the Archdiocese of New York and oversee fund development operations for that organization. And I'm not sure how much you both know about Catholic Charities in New York, but it's just a really terrific organization with a wonderful mission and an incredible board. I mean, you're talking about senior partners at McKinsey, the president of the New York Stock Exchange, just really dedicated, talented, committed philanthropists. The challenge for me, actually, when I went over to Catholic Charities, believe it or not, my commute was about 2.5 hours every day. I was living in Westfield, New Jersey, so I was commuting about 2.5 hours. This was pre-pandemic, and one day I came home and I said, "What am I doing? I'm still not seeing my daughter." So I decided to move over to the American Red Cross and oversee fund development operations for the state of New Jersey. And that was a terrific experience in many ways. It was interesting for me because prior to that, a lot of the work I was doing was with individual philanthropists, and the American Red Cross, as you may or may not know, their model is a little bit different in that about 60% of their revenue comes from corporations, at least when I was there. So it was a great experience in that I got to work with a lot of corporate partners and friends and get a sense of that particular kind of style and approach when it comes to philanthropy. And that was the year of Hurricane Harvey, Irma, and Maria. So it was the trifecta. We were pretty busy, but at the end of the day, we finished with, I believe it was around $35 million raised for the state of New Jersey. And at the time, at the American Red Cross, I think that was the most Jersey had ever raised. So that's a very long-winded way of telling you kind of where I am now, which is I oversee the Keane University Foundation. I am the CEO of the foundation, and as you might imagine, we are the philanthropic arm of this terrific university. And from a 30,000-foot view, the team and I work to raise money and secure philanthropic resources for our students, for our faculty, for some of our research and programmatic initiatives, and also for our campuses, right? We have really, really beautiful campuses throughout the state of New Jersey, and we actually even have a campus in China, which is pretty cool. So those are kind of the reasons that the team comes to work every day. That's the mission of the Keane University Foundation. And about 5 years ago when I started here, I have the fun job in that the board of directors was looking for somebody to kind of hit the reset button, restructure a little bit, and put everything back together. And when I started, believe it or not, we had a team of just 4 people, and now we've tripled in size. We have a team of 12. We are hopefully going to continue to grow, and I could see us landing with around 20 at the end of the day. But it's been a terrific ride, and I say that because if you think about the Bill Miller kind of strategic plan at Keane, phase 1 was conduct a development audit or assessment, right? So going into the organization, looking at different methodologies and systems and processes and how we were raising money. Also talking to some of our donors and our friends and our academic partners and leaders, just kind of getting a sense of, where they think the foundation is going in the right direction and what we could do better. And then, the third piece of phase 1 for me was just doing some benchmarking, right? Like taking a look at our quote unquote peer institutions and seeing how they were structured and what their model looked like. So that was phase 1. And phase 2 is actually the phase we just finished. And that's a feasibility and planning study to consider our next major fundraising campaign. And here at Keane, believe it or not, we haven't done a university-wide fundraising campaign since 2008. So it's been about 15 years, and we're finally at a place now where we just finished the study and we got a unanimous endorsement from our board and from leaders at the university to move forward. So we're now entering phase 3, which is the campaign in itself, and we envision that lasting over 5 to 7 years, and hopefully having a real transformational impact on the entire Keane family. So that's a little bit about me and my journey and what I've been up to.
I mean, that's incredibly exciting, the impact that you can have. I've got so many questions, Bill. So tell me, I mean, the fact that you've lived in France and then you went back to Pittsburgh and then, you've traveled quite a bit, which is awesome. But what's it like going from I guess, religion into academia / education? Was that very different? Was that a hard transition for you, or was it, or did it lend itself naturally?
Yeah, as I reflect on my career so far, I'm very grateful that I started out working for a nonprofit management and fundraising firm that exposed me to different sectors. So anybody who's listening who wants to get into this business and is interested in the world of philanthropy, that's certainly one path that you might consider, right? Because you're exposed to a lot of different organizations in a relatively quick kind of time frame. So for me, there was a lot of value in that, I shouldn't say I value, respect, and really am inspired by all of the different nonprofit organizations that are out there. But there are a couple that really tug on my heartstrings, right? And education, being a dad is one of them. So I got to figure that out when I was working at CCS, because I got to work in a lot of different sectors. But to answer your question, regardless of the sector, there are some kind of key ingredients that I think an organization needs to be successful. And even when I was interviewing for the job here at Keane, I was asking questions to the search committee to see as to whether or not these ingredients exist. And off the top of my head, the first one that comes to my mind is the reputation of the organization, right? And that falls in line with maybe the case for support or the story that you're telling, because there's a lot of nonprofit organizations out there doing a lot of really good work. I think there's over 1.5 million the last time I checked in the United States alone. And that means there's a lot of philanthropic competition, right? So you have to make sure that you're telling your story and doing something that will really resonate with prospective funders. So regardless of the faith-based organizations, the arts organizations, healthcare, institutions of higher education, whatever the sector might be, that your case for support is really important. But in addition to that, just as important, I would say, is leadership, right? So that's not just the president of the university or the bishop of a diocese. That's also your board. That's also respective leaders internally. How are they moving the mission forward in some fashion? So there needs to be a leadership component, and there also needs to be a kind of a pool of prospective friends or donors, right? And one of the advantages, I guess you could say, to maybe working in a higher education space as opposed to maybe some other sectors, is that we have a built-in alumni base. So right off of the bat, we have folks that we think might have a reason or an affinity to kind of give back. But yeah, you need that, right? You need a pool of prospective donors, and you need friends, and then at the end of the day, the last thing that you need is a plan, right? So you need a blueprint or a roadmap, and that in many ways is our job here at the foundation. But we need to make sure that our academic partners buy into that plan and support that plan. And I shouldn't just say our academic partners, but I should also say our board, our leaders, our donors, really everybody in the Keane community needs to understand the vision of the organization. So if you have those 4 things, regardless of really where you're working, I think you're certainly set up for success. But that's just my experience.
Brilliant. I mean, I think I concur. I agree with all of those. So, Bill and Duncan, sorry, I'm jumping into your piece right now. But Bill, tell me, are there what is a good example of tech for good in your organization that you have either had the opportunity to work on, hopefully at Keane or elsewhere in your career? Is there something that you'd want to talk about or share with us in more detail?
Sure. I sometimes joke around with some of my mentors who have been in this business longer than me, and I say, "How did you do this job before technology?" And they did it very well. But it's certainly changing the game, and it certainly seems like it's here to stay. And there's so many positives to technology. Just a few kind of examples that we implemented here at the Keane University Foundation. We're very big on data, right? So we're a data-driven organization. We're metrics-driven. And as part of that, we conduct regular kind of prospect screenings, so electronic wealth screenings, if you will, of the constituents in our database. And this is just gathering public information in an organized way so that we can really dissect it and dig into it. So that's something that we do on a regular basis here, and I found that to be very valuable. And I know some of the firms out there right now that we partner with are taking it a step further, and they're really introducing artificial intelligence into some of these wealth screening models. And I think that's really, really interesting. And I don't think that's going away. I think that's the wave of the future to a certain extent. And then there's also the modeling component, right? So taking a look at, different constituencies and kind of where they might fall into your overall map or your overall plan for the organization. Another interesting piece that's a very big higher education topic right now, not necessarily just in the world of philanthropic fund development, is ChatGPT, right? And there's just a lot going on there, which is exciting and interesting, and maybe even a little bit scary sometimes, depending on your mood. But I don't think that's going away. So those are a couple of examples that come to my mind. And on the university side too, I do think that there's a lot of interest, and there's a lot of reasons to consider distance learning and to promote non-traditional career paths as we move forward. And I know some of my colleagues at Keane are really looking at that closely, and we're already doing that to a certain extent. But I think if the 3 of us get together 10 years from now, I think that's going to be kind of built into the fabric of almost every college or university that's out there, if it's not already. So that's another one that comes to mind.
And Bill, just opening out on that, how do you compete with bigger organizations, bigger budgets, bigger teams? Like, does technology play a part in that kind of, like you were talking about data and making data driven decisions, but do you share that information around your sector? How does that all work?
Yeah, I think data is really important. I don't want to speak for President Repollet, but I think he would agree with the fact that we need to be even more data driven than we already are at Keane. And he's doing a lot to implement changes on that front. But taking a look at what other organizations are doing, benchmarking, but also just taking a look at, where are your students coming from? What are their interests? Where is the potential as you look across the country and across the world? That's all stuff that we're doing now at Keane. And how do we separate ourselves from, a Rutgers or somebody who's much bigger than us? We do it in a couple of different ways, right? So one of our pride points is that we're actually one of the most diverse institutions, believe it or not, in the country, and I think that's really cool, and I think that's something that we're really, really proud of. But in addition to that, we're also New Jersey's only urban research university, and that's a designation that no other institution of higher education in our state can share, and I think that is promising, and I think that's also compelling to students that are thinking about attending Keane University. We're also an economical institution. Many of our students are the first in their families to pursue a degree in higher education, and we do everything that we can to make sure that they can get that degree. So I think that's a factor as well. And we also have a lot of institutions of higher education have this, but I'm really proud of our alumni network. We have a really strong alumni network. We have leaders in government and business, really every sector at this point, and they want to give back and they want to help our students too. So I think that certainly is not hurting our cause. I think that's helping it. So those are just a couple of reasons that I think Keane seems to be on the rise, while other institutions maybe are struggling a little bit.
That alumni network I find fascinating. So I can only speak from personal experience. I went to university in England. I don't think the university I went to leverages that network as much as they could or should. But I think now with the technology that exists and the opportunities that you have to be building and nurturing those relationships with the students whilst they're on your grounds and living and breathing the university is massive. Like, do you get in there from the early doors, i.e. when they're applying to Keane, or do you do it much later, like when they graduate, when they finish? Like, where does that journey begin for you?
Well, it's shifting, and our vision in concert with the university is, to use a buzzword, is to instill that culture of philanthropy into the student while they're still on campus, because we're finding that they're more inclined to stay engaged in the life of the Keane community and the Keane family if we do it in that fashion. So that's kind of our strategic approach moving forward these days, if that makes sense.
No, definitely. It's fascinating.
It's such a powerful network, isn't it, to use? And as you say, it's quite, even the people that you go to class with, or that you pass by in universities and stuff like that. If I think we all saw the network that we actually are attached to, I know you get to see a bit of that with LinkedIn and other things. It's just incredible the positions that people get into or the work that they're doing. So that really is your power base, isn't it? That you lean on. And you were talking about data, and I guess that even the students in university and understanding what they're doing and what their interest is on, how much do you plug into that to help you work out what your next phases are?
Yeah, well, the way we look at it at Keane is it's all interconnected, right? And what I mean by that is, a happy faculty member makes a happy student, which makes a happy alum, right? So the experience at Keane is first and foremost probably the most important thing, but we certainly track all the data, right? So from the moment our Keane students become Keane alumni, their graduate and professional information is transferred over to the Keane University Foundation, their year of graduation, their major, their area of interest. And then as they go on to do wonderful things in their career, we do prospect research internally to try to track them as best we can and make sure that we can stay in touch with them. So in terms of maybe reaching out to an alum who is now a senior vice president at a pharmaceutical company, we would like that person to maybe come back to campus, serve as a mentor, or serve as a lecturer, maybe at a dean's forum. And in some cases, that person might want to give back and serve on the Keane University Foundation board, or serve on another board or leadership group across campus. So there's all different ways that we try to leverage the talents of our community. And, from that 30,000 foot view that I talked about earlier, if I had to boil it down to different ways people could help, I think of the 5 T's, right? So there's time, there's talent, there's treasure, and those are the big 3 that everybody always hears about. But there's 2 more that sometimes are kind of lost in the shuffle, right? So there's time, talent, treasure, but there's also testimony, right? So a willingness to talk about the foundation, to serve, or not the foundation, the university, and as overall, and serve as an ambassador and an advocate. And then ties too is the other one, right? So a willingness to introduce us to other friends or other people that might be interested in some of the work that we're doing, and that has proven to be very helpful. In fact, we even have members now on our foundation board who are not graduates of the university, but believe in the work, believe in the president's vision, and wanted to get involved. And I think that says a lot about the direction that the entire institution is going.
It's really wonderful to hear you talking about the board in a very positive light. Not that most boards aren't talked about in a positive light, but it's not something that you hear often. And I'm really intrigued to hear more, like, how big is the board? And obviously it sounds like you have a really great working relationship with the board. And I guess that's one of the keys to success, to be able to push things forward and push things through, is having that really strong connection with the board.
Yeah, we have a terrific board. Thank you for noticing that, and thank you for letting me acknowledge them. I don't know if you could be successful in my line of work without the support of your board. I think that's maybe one of the most important things, and I'm grateful that we have a very supportive board. Our board is roughly 25, and I think Board Source, last time I checked, say the average board is around 14, but the 25 number works for us at Keane. We have a really, really committed, collaborative board. They're dedicated, they're professional. In many ways, they serve as thought partners to me, even behind the scenes too, when there's not committee meetings. It's great to know that I can call them, bounce ideas off of them, and they can serve as strategic counsel. But without the board, I don't know that the Keane University Foundation would be where it is today. We certainly wouldn't have been able to accomplish what we have over the last 5 years. And it's a nice mix too, right? So we have some folks that are a little bit more seasoned, and we have some that are relatively new to the team. We actually just had our first board retreat last year, which went really, really well. And I think I'm going to try to do that every other year moving forward. But yeah, to your point, without the support of your board, it's a real uphill journey. And I'm not sure that it's the right uphill journey. I mean, you really need your board behind you if you're going to be successful in this line of work.
Amazing. Oh my gosh. Go on, Duncan.
Yeah, no, I'm just interested, obviously, on Keane Foundation. You stepped up to be CEO. You're in a very senior position at the Red Cross in New Jersey side. Just what did you find as what were the opportunities there, and what were the challenges? And we talk a lot about people falling into this area, and almost like it gets you, and then you're in, and then you're not necessarily looking for it, but once you're in, you just, it's a much more fun area to be. So quite interested in just how you made the jump up to CEO, and then when you jumped in, what you discovered.
Yeah, great question. As I reflect on kind of my career and my journey, I think about what I look for if I'm looking to hire at the Keane University Foundation, or if I'm talking to some folks that might be interested in pursuing philanthropy as their career. I think there's a couple of personal characteristics that you would like to have, and to ensure that you don't burn out, right? So what do I mean by that? Well, I think you need relationship-driven skills or interpersonal skills. So not just being able to ask for money, but being able to work in a collaborative way with your colleagues or your academic partners, depending on the sector, to really to make sure that you're stewarding and collaborating with constituents and donors, and not being overly transactional, right? There's a relationship-driven piece to this business that I think is really important. But there's also a couple of other things, right? And we talked a little bit about data earlier, but maybe this is the CCS in me, but like, I'm very data-driven, because I don't think the numbers tell the whole story, but they point you in the right direction. And I think that maybe that style resonated with the search committee when I was interviewing for the position, and that's what they were looking for. That's what they were looking for in a CEO. So I do try to bring that data-driven approach. I also am very, very big on communication. I think that's a major part of our work. Maybe that's the English major in me talking, but I do like to write. I do think proposal development and the materials that you put in front of your constituents are important, right? Like at the end of the day, I could, if Duncan liked me and he believed in our work, I could ask him for a gift without any materials and I would probably get the gift. But the materials help. They add a little bit of polish and professionalism. But then equally important, in addition to presentation, is listening and just being able to, align a donor's intent with the mission of the organization and making sure that you're really hearing, what it is that your constituents are looking for and how they want to make a philanthropic impact. And then at the end of the day, for me, this is the big one. This is the most important one. And I'm hoping this is the answer to your question, Duncan, and that I hope the board saw this when they were interviewing me. And I hope that, the Red Cross saw this when they took me on, and so, so on and so forth. But it's passion, right? Like really, really believing in what you're doing, because enthusiasm is contagious. I learned that at CCS a long time ago. But if you're not passionate, right, like how can you cascade that? If you're not passionate about the organization, how can you sell it to somebody else, right? Whether that's even from a leadership or managerial perspective, you need to be able to cascade that passion down to your team so that they're inspired. Because at the end of the day, none of us got into this business to make $10 million a year. We got into this business to have, a real impact and, provide some type of transformational change to mission-driven organizations. So those are the big ones that come to me. I always throw in the caveat, though, that passion is great and it's important and you need it, but you have to be able to monitor it, or you have to make sure that you don't burn out, because one of the challenges in our profession right now, and we're doing the best that we can at Keane to combat this. Our retention rate at Keane is pretty good. But as you both might know, turnover is a real issue right now in this field. And a lot of that, I think, has to do with the fact that people are so passionate, but they might not have the support or the resources around them to do the work that they need to do. And then they ultimately burn out. So passion is needed. It's important, but you also have to make sure that you're harnessing that passion in the right way.
Yeah, you've got to look after yourself, right, as well. And you've got to be very aware of, you can't sprint all the time, right? You sprint and rest. But you talked a little bit about the wider kind of industry. Maybe just give us a little bit, because, we've had COVID, we've had printing money. We now have interest rates going up, squeeze on the cost of living, etc. Just talk me through how maybe through the industry that's affecting. You can talk about your place if that makes sense. But just talk us through what's happening in the landscape at the moment, and then just if there's anything that you're noticing or looking at.
Yeah, well, I can certainly speak to you a little bit about what's going on through the lens of the U.S. landscape. It's been a while since I've paid as much attention to what's going on globally. But I will say in America, philanthropy is resilient, right? So almost $500 billion was given away last year. The next Giving USA report actually comes out pretty soon. I think it comes out in a week or 2 weeks, sometime this month. So I'm interested to see how we do. But there is a dollars up, donors down trend taking place. And essentially what that means is there's fewer donors, but they're giving more money. And that's becoming an industry-wide challenge and something we're all paying attention to. I'm really pleased at Keane because we have a dollars up, donors up phenomenon going on right now. And I think that's a good thing. But believe it or not, I think 20 years ago, if you look at America, 2 out of 3 Americans were giving back to charities in some fashion. And now that number is less than 50%. So that's something that I think everybody in the industry is watching. On the flip side, people are giving more and more money, and they want to impact change, and they want to make sure that they're helping organizations. And that's a major piece of really our overall economic output, right? I mean, if you're talking about $500 billion, I think that's roughly 2% of GDP. And that's a big deal, right? Like I wouldn't have thought of that or even known about that when I was a student at Randolph-Macon College. But I say that to say that it's a terrific industry to be in. And there's a lot of really, really good, talented, committed people doing great work. So anybody who's listening, who's thinking about it, I would strongly encourage you to take an even closer look at the many great ways you can get involved in the life of in the world of philanthropy, I should say.
And that's really encouraging to hear. Like it's so positive to hear that, because I definitely feel, like you said, there's been a lot of talk about people probably burning out or getting to the end of their tether and maybe looking to get out of this sector or particular sectors to exit into something that they might believe makes their life easier, but just coming back to the whys, the reason why people are doing this, so that they can have that positive impact. But I think there's definitely something there in terms of surfacing the impact that you're having as an individual, but also as a team, as an organization, seeing that the difference that you are making to someone's life, whether you're saving it, changing it, whatever you're doing, you're having that positive impact. I always think that's definitely been a theme that's probably come out of series 4, maybe, of the podcast, in terms of being able to track the impact and then surface and visualize the impact that organizations are having. It's a very hard thing to do. And whilst it's brilliant that there's so much data that exists today, I often think it's almost sometimes can be death by data. It's like, well, what data, like what am I looking at and why, and what does that mean? Like, it's very overwhelming.
Right. I would agree with you. I mean, you can get lost in the data, so you have to be somewhat wary of what it is you're looking for. You have to know what you're looking for, but the data is important, right? Like whether you're talking about activity metrics or you're talking about the impact of philanthropy, I think that those are data points that we need to know and we need to be able to share with our funders and our investors. And when you got me thinking about my time at the Red Cross, one thing that the Red Cross does really, really well that I'd like to emulate here at Keane, and we're not quite there yet, but we're moving in that direction, is talking a little bit more about volunteer output, right? So Red Cross is actually 95%, last time I checked, it was like 95% driven by volunteers, and they're really, really good at tracking the impact of their volunteers across the entire organization. And we do a lot of great stuff here at Keane too, but we're not tracking those volunteer hours as well as I would like. And last time I checked, I think like in New Jersey, it's around $26 an hour just to give back your time, right? And if I could, at the end of each fiscal year, say, in addition to the actual philanthropic resources we generated, here's XX amount in volunteer output, I think that would be really cool. So you got me thinking a little bit about the Red Cross and things I'd like to do at Keane, but I completely agree with you.
Love that. I absolutely love that. It's just shining the value, right? The value on people's time, which is what we all, we all sell. But yeah, I guess it's another way of showing the story, because you've constantly got to change, right? You've got to put your story in a different light, so you're not necessarily if people are hearing the same thing again and again, you can often tune out. So I guess there's a bit of that where you need to just maybe put a different light on the story and the impact that you're having.
I think so, and I think it's important to let your donors and your investors and funders know that this is not a transactional relationship, right? Like they are not an ATM. There are so many other ways that they can help and they can support the life and the mission of an organization, and they might not necessarily know that unless we help them understand that, right? And I think some of those data points can be very helpful in telling that story.
So, Bill, last section of the podcast, and I'm kind of diving off into a little bit of a different area, but talk to me about technology in the Keane Foundation or the university. So, if there was something that was to come up, who do you lean on? Is it the whole team? Does everyone play a part in that? Is there a specific individual? Like, how do you feed the technology into kind of what you're doing? How does that work?
Yeah, well, we have a terrific partnership with the university, and there's a wonderful division within the university. There's a number of wonderful divisions in the university, but we do work closely with our university relations team, as you might imagine. They're charged with telling the entire story for the Keane community. So we do partner with them a lot. And on the technological side, there's also an information of technologies offices, or an IT office, I should say. But the unorthodox model that we have here, which I really like, which is kind of fun, challenging, and exciting at the same time, is that, believe it or not, I'm not employed by Keane. I'm employed by the foundation. My team is employed by the foundation. So we oversee our own human resources, our own information technology, our own operation in many ways. We're almost running a business with a history in support of Keane. So on the technological side, we do have some flexibility to maybe invest in certain new cutting edge kind of ideas and approaches, and test some stuff, see what's working, see what's not. We're really big right now on just something as simple as text to give. Before I started, we weren't doing text to give, and now we're kind of testing those waters a little bit and seeing what's out there. So, whether it's a basic text to give campaign, or we're getting a little bit fancier with some modeling and some prospect screening. That is all stuff that flows through us. And who do I lean on? I lean on my excellent, committed team. I call them medium but mighty, and the reason I call them that is because when I started, as I said, we had 4 people, so we were calling ourselves small but mighty. But now we've got 12, so we feel like we're medium but mighty. But they're terrific, and they go above and beyond in so many ways. And there is no Keane University Foundation without them. They're probably our most important asset, right? Like, we have $100 million in assets under management, but I would argue that the people here driving the ship are the most important assets. So a shout out to them and the wonderful work that they do.
I love that. Absolutely love that, because you're right. This is never down to one person. This is always down to teams of people. And do you know what? Well, I think you might be one of the first to have actually done a proper shout out to their team. So yeah, like, awesome work to your entire team. And I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to share what you have today with us for this episode. And yeah, keep up the good work. I'm really excited to see what happens, in the next few years. If you've got a team of, what is it? You're 12 now. Plans to get to 20. So there's still quite a bit of growth there to achieve. But I suspect that's going to come together very, very quickly by the sounds of it. But yeah, thank you so much for your time, Bill.
Well, I really enjoyed talking to both of you, and it's always great to make the connection and meet others in this space. And, let me just kind of reiterate what I said when we started the conversation, and thank you both for your time, because I know there are a lot of really, really talented, good people out there. So I very much appreciate the conversation. I hope maybe we can do it again down the road. And Duncan, if I get over to London in late August, I'd love to maybe get together, have a cup of coffee. But this was terrific. Thank you. Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.